Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter, J.K. Rowling causes a firestorm by having lunch, and the BBC claims that toddlers can be racist. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to the show. Now, occasionally, culture warriors like to have a little competition. A story breaks in the news and they take to social media to try and be as irrational and hysterical as possible about it. There's usually about one of these competitions a week. So last week, it was the announcement that Channel 4 was likely to be privatised. And the winner of the most hysterical response that time came from the MP, Claudia Webb, who had this to say: "The government has just confirmed its intention to privatise Channel 4. This is not freedom or independence, it is the seedbed of fascism." So we'll ignore the missing apostrophe there and just focus on the deranged historical illiteracy of comparing the privatisation of a TV channel to the rise of Benito Mussolini. But look, it's a new week now, we have a new competition. This time, it's all based on the news that Elon Musk is trying to buy Twitter. In what has been described as a hostile takeover, Musk has offered $43 billion to buy the platform. Twitter's executive board have panicked and they're taking measures to prevent the sale, even though it's clearly not in the financial interest of their shareholders to do so. It would seem they would rather the company collapses entirely than Musk get his grubby hands on it. And you can see why. Musk is a free speech absolutist and wants tech giants to stop setting the limits of acceptable speech according to their own particular ideological worldview. Silicon Valley, you see, is dominated by those who are in the grip of a new identity-obsessed religion of what they misleadingly call social justice. One of the key tenets of this religion is the conviction that free speech is a bad thing and needs to be curbed by those in power. In this case, it's big tech who are to decide what we can and cannot read, write, say, hear, or think. And there's another word for people like that: authoritarians. Now, to be fair, big tech is always under pressure from governments to regulate the material that appears on their platforms. Our Tory government is currently pushing through their disastrous online safety bill, which is only likely to put extra pressure on big tech to censor. But all of this is based on a false premise, that online discourse directly produces real-world harm. Now, we can have a debate about all of this, of course, but studies into media effects theories have pretty much conclusively found that there is no direct correlation between public behaviour and the media they consume. Leaving that to one side, you'll have noticed that activists who have been for years cheering on big tech censorship always repeat the mantra, well, Twitter is a private company, it can do what it likes. But clearly that depends on who is running that private company, because we haven't heard much of that mantra since the news broke that Musk might be the new boss. Instead, we've had various meltdowns of volcanic proportions from prominent figures on the identitarian left, which has admittedly been quite a lot of fun. And so this brings us on nicely to this week's competition. Whose reaction to Musk's takeover bid has been the most deranged? Well, let's start with this one from journalist and academic Jeff Jarvis. He says, "Today on Twitter feels like the last evening in a Berlin nightclub at the twilight of Weimar Germany." Godwin's law in action right there. Oh. Then there's this from writer for Salon, Matthew Rosa. He says, "If Elon Musk allows Trump back on Twitter, it will be a death blow to the free world. Trump's big lie will spread like a virus." I discussed the danger of Trump's big lie for Salon. Like Hitler's big lie, it must not be normalised lest fascism return. Who uses words like lest? These people sound like Old Testament prophets. Then you've got the author Max Boot. Now he went with, "For democracy to survive, we need more content moderation, not less," which is a bit like saying that burning books is the only way to prevent the rise of fascism. Comic book author Lila Sturgis has this entry into our hysteria competition. Let's have a look. "If Musk buys Twitter, it will become completely uninhabitable for trans people." No explanation as to why that would be, of course. We just have to take this prophecy on trust. The American video game developer Brianna Wu was reliably maniacal, as usual. So this is what Brianna Wu said: "If Musk buys Twitter, dismantles everything the trust and safety team has done, many of us will go elsewhere. It will literally destroy Twitter." And mark the sequel. "Right-wing lunatics may despise us and the standards of civility we expect, but the truth is their social media networks fail. without us. So this is from the activist whose idea of civility, by the way, includes wishing pain, penury and general misery upon anyone who dares to disagree with them, trying to ruin people's livelihoods and reputations if they express an unpopular view, and celebrating when they die. They seem to believe that occasionally tweeting out hashtags such as be kind and love wins means they can still consider themselves on the right side of history when they say that they want their political opponents to die in a grease fire. The journalist David Leavitz had said this: if Elon Musk successfully purchases Twitter, it could result in World War III and the destruction of our planet. But, you know, I think the winner has to be Michael Volpe, OBE, founder of Opera Holland Park, who came up with this doozy. Elon Musk buying Twitter is the end of the world, basically. He'll amplify every right-wing Nazi he can find. So these meltdowns, they're right up there with the reaction to the Brexit referendum. You remember when David Cameron said that Brexit could trigger World War III? Or when Boris Johnson said that Hitler would have been pro-Remain? And consider this, all of these examples I've shown you, they are all specifically about this one issue of Musk buying Twitter. But I would be willing to bet a lot of money that I could now, just on the basis of those tweets, tell you those people's opinions on virtually any political or cultural subject, be it Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, Brexit, Donald Trump, gender self-identification, anything you like. And you'd be able to do it too. Because when people become immersed in an ideology, they're no longer thinking for themselves, they're reading from an approved script, following someone else's rules. It's the death of critical thinking. Now, of course, when we look back at Brexit, most people are now happy to admit that they went a bit mad. You know, hindsight is a great detoxifier. And it'll be the same with Elon Musk's attempt to buy Twitter. Whether it happens or not, I'm sure a lot of those who've been playing the Hysteria Olympics this week will, in years to come, look back on this moment and shake their heads and laugh about how silly they were. I'm sure that most of the disciples of this new religion of critical social justice will do the same eventually. We're living through a bizarre time in which a powerful minority has succumbed to an ideology and can no longer engage with the real world as it actually is. They see fascists in every shadow. They can only see the world through the prism of group identity and power structures, and they are terrified of freedom of speech and the horrors it might bring. I, for one, hope that Elon Musk is successful in his takeover bid. The big tech oligopoly needs to be challenged somehow, and given how they all collaborated to take down Parler when it threatened to emerge as a rival to Twitter, this might be the only way. If Musk does succeed, it might not make things any better, but it can hardly make them any worse. My studio guests this evening are the comedians Scott Capurro and Nick Dixon. What do you think, Elon Musk? Scott, I'm going to come to you. What do you think Elon Musk taking over Twitter?
I think it's great.
It's good, isn't it?
We'll get all that news from space. We'll find out where all the aliens are. And also, we chat with them and stuff and swap info, right? Exactly. What are you up to? Working on my three heads and stuff, whatever.
That'd be nice.
And then he's going to create a new phone. You know about this, right?
No, I don't know.
He's creating a phone to compete against iPhone. You can manipulate with your brain.
Other people's brains or your own brain?
Whatever. We're all one brain anyway. But it's so great because I'm old and my fingers are crippled. I cut my hand on my phone today, so I won't have to use my fingers anymore. I can just think, you know.
Just think and things appear.
Yes, buy a pair of Birkenstocks, bing, there they are.
I mean, he's playing God.
Well,
and you shouldn't be wearing Birkenstocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny people call him all these things. You're right about that. Because when you label people, you know, I mean, we've all been labeled fascists at one time or another.
Everyone has.
You've been called a fascist.
Every day.
Yeah, whisper in your ear, I'm sure.
That's just by my family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just calling him this stuff is so silly. I think it just means that people are jealous. Everyone wants to buy Twitter. We all want it.
I'd love to buy Twitter.
So fun.
I don't have that much money, though. $43 billion. It's worth it, isn't it, Nick?
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's so much fun watching Musk wind up the political and big tech elite. It's absolutely hilarious. Some people are worried about Neuralink, that he's going to take over your brain, but I like him, so I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Well, that's what Scott's into.
Yeah,
he likes the Neuralink idea.
What was really hilarious was a Washington Post article which said we've got to stop these rich people controlling the means of communication. They're owned by Jeff Bezos from Amazon. Anyone heard of him, guys? It's so ridiculous. They also said a hilarious thing that Musk has a history of punching down on Twitter, and they cited the fact that he attacked Justin Trudeau, world leader. You know, I suppose if you are the richest man in the world, you're almost inevitably punching down. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Musk has to check his stocks every day, so he cannot have a pop at Bezos or Warren Buffett. You know what I mean? Because it's almost impossible to punch up.
Who could he punch up? No one, really.
God, that's the only one.
That's it, God. And that wouldn't be appropriate for Easter Sunday.
No,
yeah.
Happy Easter, everyone.
You could take a swing at Jesus right now. He's hanging around.
Up now, Scott.
He's back and he's not happy. He is
Right,
not happy.
let's move on.
He hates coming back. It's exhausting. With an iPhone without fingers.
Well, yeah. It's a great day. Jesus is back. Great celebration of Jesus coming back. That's what you meant.
That's what I meant.
See,
yeah.
Nick is very religious, and Scott is very blasphemous. So this
I'm
should be a very,
I'm
very
all over
exciting
Jesus.
show.
I'm all over him.
You stop that right now. Anyway, now let's get a question. We've got a couple of questions from people at home. So this is from Jane. Hello, Jane. So she asks, are women more emotional than men? Okay, now this is, of course, a reference to the manager of Northern Ireland women's football team, Kenny Shields. You'll have seen this story this week. And Shields claimed that after their 5-0 defeat to England, that women are more emotional than men. He was saying this in the press conference afterwards. Actually, we've got a clip of the news conference here.
Right through the whole spectrum of the women's game, because girls and women are more emotional than men, so they take a goal gun in. They don't take that very well.
And I should say that Shields later apologised, and the Northern Ireland team captain issued a statement saying all the players are standing by Shields. The Irish Football Association has also accepted his apology. Any thoughts, Scott? What do you think?
Well, right as he said it, I watched him. I've seen it before, that clip.
Yeah.
And you can see as he's saying it, do you notice? As the words are coming out of his mouth, he's like, I shouldn't be saying this. And then the look in his eyes as he gets to the end of the sentence is, oh, God, I'm going to get my wife in my ear about this one. I mean, you know.
But it happens all the time. You don't have a filter. You know, you must know what that's like.
I'm very emotional, but I don't show it professionally because I'm afraid they're going to jump on me like dogs on fresh meat. I think it's great in sport when they get emotional. I really enjoy it. Yeah. And I see men on the field when they lose in football cry all the time.
Yeah, I don't understand football. You're a big football fan,
Yes.
Nick. Now, you have played football. You play every week.
I do.
Do you cry when you win a goal? Do you win a goal? Is that what they say? Do you hug your fellow teammates in the interval?
The only emotional experience is rage. Someone fouls me in the game and I have to try not to punch them in the pub after. But I shouldn't have said that on telly. But here's the thing. This was very interesting, this clip. He was citing the fact that when the women's teams concede a goal, they rapidly tend to concede another one a few minutes later.
Is that true?
And he said statistically it's true.
Okay.
The one thing he's missing there is that women goalkeepers are terrible. And that's known in the game. If you watch the women's football, I haven't watched it for a few years, the outfield players are okay, then the keepers are so bad, it's unbelievable.
So what
is that?
He should have come on and just said the real reason is that women are really bad at goalkeeping.
And that would have saved the whole thing. He would have had no problems at all.
That would have been great.
But my only follow-up is, I'm not saying if women are more emotional or not, but the fact that he's getting attacked for it in this culture tends to make me think it's probably true. Because everything people are attacked for is true.
Well, wait a minute, but he's not being attacked by women insofar as the players that he represents are saying, hold on a minute, he's said nothing wrong.
But do you think they're just trying to prove that they're not emotional by keeping really cool about it?
They could be.
I watch mostly volleyball. I watch a lot of volleyball.
Oh, okay.
A hugely popular sport in other parts of the world. And the female teams are incredibly stoic, I think.
Are they?
Yeah, and it may just be the teams he looks after, or maybe he creates a certain level of high emotion amongst his teams. It could be him.
No, he says
It
across
could
the
be.
game, across the women's game, they're conceding rapidly.
The way he sees it through his
men,
prism, though.
You know, he says I'd like to see the stats for the men's
Yeah,
game,
like that.
because when men concede a goal, we come back and fight back, you see. And what's happening is women are conceding, and then collapsing and conceding another. That's his claim. If the stats back it up.
I don't think this is to do with gender. I mean, it
might not be the reason, but
I played
that's
football,
the stat.
if a goal went against my team, I would probably cry and rail at the gods. And
That's why you're not allowed to play in our game, Andrew.
oh, okay, is that why? All right, that's fair enough. But you know, I just don't think that. Do you think generally women are more emotional? Should we even be discussing this? Or should we
Three men should definitely be discussing. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, okay.
Three men should be. I
just don't think it's true. I think men are really emotional.
I do too. I think I work with all sorts of genders.
Yes.
And I don't notice any
on this panel.
Yeah, exactly. I don't notice any sort of common emotional response from anyone really.
No, and like I said,
Men shouldn't be emotional though.
This is your old-fashioned.
Men can cry a little bit in private if their dog dies. They're allowed just one tear in private in a sort of back room, and then they
What if it's quite a sort of
move
what
on.
if it's a sort of fluffy dog like a Labradoodle or something, like a feminine?
Well, then they
dog?
shouldn't have that dog.
They shouldn't have. They need a bulldog.
Yeah, they need a masculine dog, and they can cry one tear in private.
Right, there's the
that's
rules.
just how it worked in the north.
There's the rules.
And if
from
you don't
Nick
like that,
Dixon.
that's my culture.
My mother was quite emotional, but only when she drank. Yeah, it was the booze that really brought it out. Irish, you know. And she would she'd knock us around a little, but we probably deserved it. But overall, I think within my family,
That's a very masculine attitude.
Yeah, in my family, the only thing I felt with my sister's response compared to my brother's and mine and our family was my sister. She had a menacing tone to her voice that really controlled my brother and I. Yeah, she's better with words, and she really humiliated us in front of other people.
Wow.
She's really good at it.
This explains a lot about you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hence the twisted perverted quality that you now display. Let's move on to another question now. This is from Alex. Alex has sent in this question. It says, should non-binary people be barred from female changing rooms? Now, this caused a storm. You probably saw this on Twitter this week because it went a bit mad. So there was this 18-year-old Charlie Moore, who identifies as non-binary, was shopping for a prom dress. And then the staff at Monsoon, this was at staff, the staff at Monsoon stopped Charlie Moore from using the female changing rooms. This was in Birmingham. And then the shop apologised and offered to help Charlie find the perfect prom dress free of charge. But the reason why I think this is quite interesting is, firstly, there was the complaint from the customer, and then Monsoon came in and said, OK, we're very sorry, we're going to help you find your ideal dress. And then a lot of feminists were very angry and saying, so wait a minute, if I go to Monsoon, might there be a male-bodied person in the changing room? What are you saying here? So how do we resolve that? Again, we have this situation where both sides have different views.
Well, exactly,
about this, conflicting rights.
But companies have to recognise that. So if you read the original article, it's funny, we were talking about emotion. The appeal was very emotional. I felt bad about this incident happening. And of course, you would feel bad. I can imagine they did. But the company then steps in and says, we'll get you a dress. We're so sorry this happened. But they're missing the wider implications for women's safety. So it's this kind of politicization of customer complaints, basically. It's being the ultimate Karen, although a non-binary person probably wouldn't identify as Karen. But the point is, the point is, it's much more complicated, and woke corporations wade into these things. Of course, as a company, you want to, or this isn't a corporation, it's a shop, isn't it, I think. But as a company, you want to just say, oh, sorry about that, we'll do everything we can. But it's not that simple, because women are going to feel unsafe.
Well, I'd say a company shouldn't be in a position of judging anyone, like, least of all their customers. And if they have a customer who identifies as non-binary, that's up to the customer. It's nothing to do with the company. But when we're talking about changing rooms, when we're talking about people getting undressed, and, you might send your daughter along to a Monsoon or something, you don't want her in there with a man who identifies as non-binary. That sort of makes
sense.
People
did complain about them being in the shop. So
is it just a numbers game? Is it just a utilitarian thing? Is it just like, who's the greatest good for the greatest number? Is it just, well, there are more women customers than there are non-binary customers, so surely the strategy, surely the calculation ought to be that they should side with women.
Monsoon wanted it to go away, so they tried to throw a dress at this person as quickly as possible.
That's what they did, just threw a dress.
Take that and go. They are nice dresses, though. Remember the Top Shop in Oxford Circus? Dressing. The dressing room for men was just one large room. We all share the room.
Really?
With different mirrors. I'd spend hours in there. And I really
like your dream.
I loved window shopping in there. And the guys are a bit embarrassed dressing in front of one another. So I can imagine that, in a women's dressing area, it's the same thing. I just think what they need to do is have a non-binary dressing area.
Right, so there's your answer. Why not just have a third area?
Or all the dressing rooms could just be separate.
Could be cubicles.
Cubicles. The way the Victorians did. They had it made, the Victorians. Long ago.
They got everything
all
right
the
in the
toilets
Victorian
were,
era.
they did. All the toilets were cubicles. They were all gender non-specific. If you go to museums that were with the same old toilets, they just shared a sink. So they could do that with
Britain ruled the world. It was a great
Look,
time.
we're not going to turn this show into a lamentation of what we've lost.
That's what Scott's saying.
There were problems
He's saying
in Victorian
let's bring
England.
back colonialism. That's what I heard.
And I'm moving on from that. By the way, did you know that in the Victorian era, tapeworm eggs were perceived to be these miracle diet pills? They didn't know what they were, and they would swallow them. People would get very thin.
No one did that.
Because there's a worm inside eating all your food.
We all have worms anyway. Get a good one if you're going to take one. Have control over it.
It's not very Eastery content.
No, it's not very Easter at all. We'll move on to something about chocolate and bunnies.
It was an egg.
Like that. It was an egg, true. We've got another question. No, let's have a look. There was a question on my... All right, listen, we don't have it on my autogo's crash, so let's talk instead about Easter. What are you doing for Easter, Scott?
Well, my husband made a roast, and then he cooked.
Okay.
So
this is why you get married.
To get roasted. It was
now, do I have to apologise for that? No, because we were talking about food.
No, his pork is very oily, so it was nice. It was a nice warm afternoon, and
we've gone to break.
But he wants to go to midnight Easter mass because, like I said, he's evangelical. So we're going to go celebrate the.
Are you going to do that?
I'm thinking about it. Why not?
I think you should. I think it would be sportive. But even if you're not a great believer, I think actually the atmosphere
quite beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Free glass of wine, right?
Well, no, you get a sip of wine.
Oh, right.
It's communion wine, which is the blood of Christ.
Right. Well, whatever. Yeah, get a little tipsy, and maybe some free bundt cake. I'm in it just to support him. I don't care. Organized religion freaks me out a little bit because it can be quite violent. But the way he practices it, basically, they just sit around and chat a bit, make each other feel better about themselves.
I mean, I get that some religions and some at certain times in certain cultures, in certain contexts, can lead to violence. I would say that Christianity in the modern era is generally about turning the other cheek and peace and love and all of that. Nick?
Absolutely, yeah. It's the one true religion as well, which is good. You can say that at Easter. You can say that, and no one can say anything.
This is your opinion, of course.
Yeah. Well, I also feel that maybe I shouldn't even be working here at Easter, but the way I'm justifying it is I'm just talking about Jesus in a positive way a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that God will see that as like, well, fair enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's right. Well, listen, again, I don't want to move into evangelical.
Are you worried about your safety, Nick, a little bit? Are you worried about your
No, he's worried about the afterlife. He's worried about
right.
damnation, you know, as we should all be.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on.
What?
We've got a final question now. This is from Andy. So Andy has said, has divorce become too easy, right? So this is the no-fault divorce law, which came into effect earlier this month, which allows couples to end their marriage without apportioning blame. And the new rules apparently resulted in a 50% rise in divorce applications for the first week. Because it is quite fascinating with the divorce, because you have to sort of... because when couples get divorced, you have to send a big, long list. Your solicitor compiles a big, long list sort of saying why that person was so bad at marriage.
So many reasons. Many. But, you know, I'm angry about this, only because now we're going to miss the story. We're going to miss those details. It's the best part of divorce.
It is.
You're seeing them just rail against one another in the courtroom. It's so much fun, and now we're not going to see that.
Surely this is healthier, isn't it? Just
No,
like,
no.
you know,
This is healthy.
Well,
No.
surely because if people want to get divorced, they're going to get divorced anyway.
Andrew, let me explain why you're wrong.
Okay.
This basically makes marriage pointless. I mean, the idea they're saying, oh, it's no blame, guys, like it's some cool new age thing. The problem is you can just get married at the drop of a hat. And in this country, if you're a man, especially, the divorce laws tend to be against you. The custody laws are against you. So now you're entering into this pointless contract. It has all downside. Get married privately in the church, guys. And don't bother with the state, because what is marriage at this point?
Wait a minute, though. But surely people have to have the freedom. This is about liberty. If you don't want to get married, if you're in a marriage and you want to get out of the marriage, you should have the right to get out, right?
No, but they're saying
you just want to make it as hard as possible.
No, marriage means if there's no reason. Oh yeah, I just felt like cheating. Then marriage means nothing. And the other thing about this is not actually progressive, because Sweden has this thing where they basically got rid of spousal maintenance.
Right.
So if you're in this country, the other person can leave, and then you're going to end up having to pay for them. They can just leave on a whim any day, and this is going to speed up the process. In Sweden, at least, they've said, yeah, okay, you can leave, but you're not really going to get any money from the other person, except in some rare cases and in a kind of transitional period.
Yes.
So we have a weird mixture of very old laws where, like, usually the man's going to have to pay forever, but at the same time, you can just leave on a whim.
Yeah, but in Sweden, they have the highest rate of suicide in Western Europe. So to leave a marriage there easily, you have to jump out of a building. Here, right, you say, you know,
I'm not saying Sweden's perfect. I'm saying if you're going to go all liberal and ultra-progressive, at least do it properly so that it's fair.
I can agree with you, Nick, that, you know, people shouldn't enter into marriage lightly and that they should be taking it seriously. But once they're there, is it really helpful afterwards to have this post-mortem where we just completely say, this was all the things that went wrong with the marriage? Why did we just gracefully leave it and then everyone's happy?
Yeah, if it really was that. The issue is that... The issue is that marriage will mean nothing when you've got no fault. It won't work.
Do you think marriage... I mean, I was at your wedding.
50%
you were there, yeah. You were a witness.
I was a witness, and I witnessed your vows, and you've kept them all, to be fair,
yeah, and my husband has too. The house has never been cleaner. But I know what he means by the idea that... But I think the marriage meaning something is really between the two people. It's a civil act that has no more or less meaning than any civil act does.
It depends if you're coming from a religious perspective.
I guess I'm talking about my marriage because you brought that up. And I do feel as though my husband promised me nothing would change, but things have changed. And the relationship between the two people increases or decreases based on them. It's really not about the license you sign. And I think you're being a bit old-fashioned, a bit
Nick, old-fashioned? No way.
Well, or I'm saying go ultra-progressive and be like Sweden. I'm saying we're in the middle. We're old-fashioned because we have this spousal maintenance thing that Sweden's got rid of. So I'm saying we have the worst of liberalism and old-fashioned.
So get rid of spousal maintenance too.
Yeah, if we're doing this, I don't want to do any of it. But if we're doing it, obviously I wouldn't do any of it.
Young people don't want to get married anymore either because they don't want to go through the struggle of separating because they know what a pain it could be. You know.
It's also about they're trying to destroy the whole idea of the family, and the state wants to own children. That's a bigger
conversation. But you're for marriage. You want to get married one day?
I'm for it in principle. I'm not saying I can do it.
No, you've never done it. I
advocate many things that I'm not going to do.
Yeah. No, I've never seen you as marriage material, to be honest. So let's move on. We've got to take a break now.
Always something like that.
After the break, Nick's going to have a bit of a complaint, and we'll come back and we're going to be talking to Alcasego Cuthbert from Don't Divide Us, who will be here to discuss important issues relating to parenting and education. See you in a minute.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. According to the BBC's early years guidance, parents should examine their attitudes on race if their toddler only has white friends. The guidance was in the BBC's Tiny Happy People website, which includes advice for parents on discussing race and religion with children. Some educators say the resource is not impartial. Joining me to discuss this is Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert from Don't Divide Us. Alka.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could talk us through precisely what happened. These are guidelines that have been issued by the BBC, which are effectively telling parents to watch out in case they're harbouring a racist in their family. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, it comes on the back of their Tiny Happy People guidance for parents that I believe the Duchess of Cambridge was instrumental in setting up, which is quite ironic because the educator involved, Tanisha Hicks Beresford, I believe, has written a blog saying that all the royalty is racist, but here she is working with the BBC on this thing that is indeed saying that that no toddler is racially innocent.
We've seen this before. I mean, there have been many activists and academics who've been trying to say that even babies can be racist. Yeah. Strikes me as nonsense, isn't it?
It is absolute nonsense. It's also really contradictory and illogical because here they are, on the one hand, citing highly discredited psychological research into bias and discrimination, studies that their own researchers have kind of distanced themselves from.
Yes.
And they're saying, look, even babies can see race. And yet, a few years down the line, you see educational materials saying, we have to teach children how to see race. You're thinking, hang on,
yes.
What's going on here? Do they see race or don't they see race?
Well, there's all sorts of incoherence within this movement.
There is. It is utterly incoherent. And I think the main thing about the BBC guidelines is that this hasn't come out of the blue. The kind of official talking to parents has been really set in place largely through sex and relationship education that predated the race stuff. And now the race stuff is just sort of coming in here. And, aside from the nonsense about, checking your children's friends, does your child have enough black friends? I mean, how's that going to work if you live in the middle of Wales or somewhere where there just aren't a lot of black people there? Aside from that, it's the thing that slipped into parents. You might want, to be kind. You might want to check your unconscious bias. To be kind, you might want to, think about how you talk about these things. So it's intruding into the intimate sphere of the family. And that's really, really not on. That's
Why
quite
is
dangerous.
it, though? I mean, all of these things you're describing, these are highly, highly contested ideas, right? These notions of unconscious bias. I mean, we know this from the studies that unconscious bias training doesn't achieve anything, right? So there's that idea. Then there's like concepts of like white privilege, the Robin DiAngelo idea that every human interaction is underpinned by white supremacy. You know, all of this stuff, which they're treating it when they implement these policies as though it's settled, as though all of that is true. Well, no, it's not. That's an aspect of this religious movement, or this quasi-religious movement.
Yeah.
So why is that being implemented as policy?
Well, I think it's. I mean, it's interesting. You say it doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't achieve anything in terms of its stated aims of, you know, trying to sort of create wholesale social progress. It does achieve quite a lot in terms of informal inhibitions, informal kind of gaslighting of informal people. Creates an atmosphere where, you know, people check themselves all the time. I mean, just the name Black Joy, right? I mean, who wants to be against Black Joy? So right from the start.
This was another story this week where someone has said that we should introduce the concept of Black Joy into the classroom.
Yeah.
What was that about? What were they saying?
Oh my gosh! Well, the reasoning behind it, I think, really it rests on the idea of in 21st century Britain, you know, really multi-ethnic, where most of the you know really egregious, shocking instances and manifestation of racism don't really exist anymore. Not to say it doesn't exist, but in the way that I experience it and lots of other people experience it, it doesn't. Many people are very okay with interracial relationships and etc. In this context, they're saying that non-white children it's almost like have to have a legacy, a racial legacy, that you know, either from the past they suffer, and to compensate from this, they have to have the racial opposite of racial joy, i.e. Black Joy, which is really stupid because it's stupid for it's stupid and wrong for two reasons. Sort of ethically, it's forcing that burden of representation on non-white people.
Yes.
And it's assuming that somehow we lack the imagination and the intellectual wherewithal to be excited and enjoy education as it is. I mean, if you have good curricula and you have good teachers, a teacher will bring joy to the whole class, and not just joy as it happens, because education means frustration and anger and disappointment as well. So it's not like a kind of massive therapy feel-good session. Education's hard, but you have solid, educationally worthwhile content. You have teachers who know what they're talking about. You kind of got to like children. I mean, obviously, if you don't like children, you wouldn't be a teacher.
I don't know. I know some teachers.
Well, you would hope so. You would hope so. And also, teachers need a little bit. They need a bit of freedom to try out different things. But they're going to lose that freedom if they don't speak out against this, because they're going to lose parents' trusts.
I mean, it's very sad, particularly, because the end point of this stuff does seem to be racial segregation, encouraging children to see themselves first and foremost as a skin colour, and to see, you know, white people generally as oppressors, and other people as those who are oppressed. Utterly
narcissistic. The idea that you can only learn if you see someone of your own skin colour is absurd. You know, absolutely absurd. You look at children. Young children will identify with anything, right? I identified with a wooden puppet in Thunderbirds when I was young. As you get older, you begin to get socialised more. And your imagination kind of does shrink a bit because you're thinking about the world outside. And then you can argue there's a case for reviewing the curriculum, looking at it, improving it to make it not more representative of the yellow person there, the brown person there, the mid-brown or the black person there, but to actually make it more truthful. Yeah, sure. You know, and that is what I hope the government is going to do, and I hope it keeps its nerve on this.
There's a grain of truth with the decolonisation idea, which insofar as there are some writers and artists and voices who were pushed out unfairly, and it's fine to redress that, but that's not what we're talking about here.
That is absolutely not what we are not talking about here. That is a perfectly respectable and legitimate intellectual educational task.
Yeah.
That is not what is happening. No. That really is not what is happening. And you can see that it's not what's happening, because when they say, oh, we're going to include writers of, going to include more writers of colour, we're going to have the GCSEs now include 25% more writers who are not white. And you look at what what you find, this is meant to be enriching, right, and expanding the imaginative content of of education. And what it's actually doing is just introducing a set range of authors. You look at most of the lists and it's the same writers all the time. And it's not just their skin colour that's important, it's the fact that they all espouse this version of racism and anti-racism.
Yes.
You know, you don't get the different voices there. You know, there are...
No, it's not diverse.
No, it's not. It actually reduces diversity. It actually pushes towards a real conformity.
And you're part of Don't Divide Us, of course. And would you like to tell us a bit about what Don't Divide Us is trying to do in this current climate?
We're a campaign, and our focus is on education in schools, because we think that's like hugely important, because everybody goes to school. Also, a lot of this stuff is not that evident. It is happening. We know it's happening, but it isn't like America where it's really clear cut. So our campaigns are really, we're trying to, first of all, calling for transparency. We want schools and local councils to be very open and make available their material when they're teaching things that are controversial, right? So if any teachers or parents out there are worried about material that they're getting or being asked to teach, we have had teachers say, you know, I don't think I can stay at this school anymore. I'm being asked to teach things that are just against my conscience. So if you're worried about that, please do check the website, get in touch, find out more about our campaigns, support us.
What's the website?
It's
don'tdivideus.com.
Yes.
Yeah, don'tdivideus.com.
HTTP.
And you can also on Twitter, which is @Don'tDivideUsNow.
Yeah.
And it's very much worth checking that out. I think you're doing fantastic work.
Thank you.
Al-Kasegol Cuthbert, everyone. After the break on Free Speech Nation, Scott Capurro and Nick Dixon will return for Devil's Advocate. You won't want to miss it. See you in a minute.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my beautiful panel, Scott Capurro and Nick Dixon. We're going to help deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you have an unfiltered dilemma you'd like us to solve, just email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our best to answer your problems and sort your life out. Anyway, this part of the show is called Devil's Advocate, where our panellists discuss one of the burning issues of the day. And this week, our panel are going to be talking about whether Twitter is a good or a bad thing. So first, arguing in favour of Twitter, it's Nick Dixon.
Thanks so much. I wrote like a stream of consciousness on my phone about this, so do you mind if I read it out?
Go ahead.
I'm not just looking at text. All right, so Twitter. Okay, let me explain to you why Twitter is a great thing. So, firstly, without Twitter, we might have accidentally spent more time with our friends and family, right? Instead of reading arguments between strangers masquerading as eggs on our phones, right? Number two, we wouldn't have known that everything bad that happens is solely due to Brexit, and we might have mistakenly attributed problems in the world to other causes. Three, before Twitter, we didn't really know much about Owen Jones, and we would have missed his humility and compassion. Four, we might not have known that COVID even existed, right? And we wouldn't have realised we had to be terrified of it forever. Number five, we might...
Controversial.
No, just saying. We might not have known how safe and effective the vaccine is. That's sort of a multi-layered kind of like, I think people are just taking me literally there.
They are. It's like always a risk, Nick.
Yeah, who knows what I even mean, but it's safe and effective. Number six, we might not have known about the great vision of the World Economic Forum. No one again.
There are people at home, Nick,
at home are loving this.
Yeah,
they get my base are loving this. Number seven, we might not have even seen any pictures of chemtrails. Is this just my timeline? Number eight, we might not know what the Ukrainian flag even looks like. We wouldn't have known that the initials FBPE stand for I am mentally ill. And number nine, I wouldn't have learned that Andrew Doyle is a far-right heterosexual, and which I'm told most days on Twitter. By Andrew's friends. And finally, I've been piled on Twitter myself. I had a big pile on. The comedy world attacked me. What felt like half the internet attacked me. And that was a great thing I wouldn't have experienced. That was character building. I lost weight due to stress. Great weight loss thing. And also, I learned a lot about the comedy world, because I assumed a lot of people in the comedy world were stupid. And what I learned from this is that, no, they're stupid and evil. So that was a great thing for me. So all in all, I think we should keep Twitter. It's a great thing. Thank you very much.
Nick Dixon. Well, very persuasive. And now arguing against that, we have Scott Capurro.
Thank you. I think Nick missed the point, although well done. But I think he's delusional. The problem with Twitter isn't that it exists. It's fine, and exchange of information is always a good idea. But that you have a certain limited number of symbols to do it. I think this is ruining people's brains. It's making people... It's difficult now for them to concentrate on anything more than 140 symbols. We watch a film, my husband falls asleep in 5 minutes. I'm trapped watching it for 2 hours because I'm old. I wasn't brought up on Twitter, and now I have less time to myself. Also, I think what we're missing is the details in arguments. That's why people are arguing so much, but without an argument based on any fact, because there are no details in 140 symbols. I mean, now when someone says, oh, you're this way, I think that's all they need. They think that's all they need to say. You're just like this. They just exclaim things, and that's it. I like the story. I like to know what's behind, the evil, stupid comedian and what they say. So I want more symbols. That's why I like Facebook, because I'm old. I like people that rattle on and on all night long, and then end it with a song on a ukulele. That's what I prefer. So if Twitter would just become a bit longer, I think it would work more. Maybe double the number of symbols, or give up a limited number of symbols. Just stop that. Just make it Twitter with as much as you like.
You should go on Getter. That's longer. I mean, it's quite right-wing, but it's longer. You can write more.
Very good arguments.
I like longer things. I just do.
What I would say to you, Scott, is that you really want essays, don't you? You want essays, people to be able to engage in the sort of like long
I want
form.
an explanation from my father as to why my life turned out this way. That's what I want. I think that's going to take more than 140 symbols. What would Jesus have done with 140, right? Not enough.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he used to speak in very pithy sound bites, didn't he?
He was.
Blessed are the meek. That's a tweet.
That was a good one. Yeah, that is a good tweet. Yeah. But I think when he was, on the mound espousing, I think he needed more than
Your
those.
biblical exegesis is wonderful.
I get the Ten Commandments done in a thread.
You absolutely could.
Yeah.
It would be a killer thread, that.
Yeah.
It would do very well.
But he had more heretics than 140 symbols. I think he needed more time to express. He left. at a very early age. We missed him. I just feel like we're going to miss out on so much if we keep communicating in these short sound bites.
Very interesting debate, by the way, and thank you both for your contributions. I mean, I would say that Twitter is the kind of, it has a kind of vampiric quality in the way that it drains your energy away and your time. So last night I ended up involved in a Twitter spat. Now, this often happens, but this was the football writer at The Guardian who started attacking Leo Kearse, who's a comedian on GBNews, amongst other things.
He gets attacked most days, but he does bring it on himself a little
But he
bit.
enjoys it. He enjoys it. But this
I end up defending him in long
What was
threads.
interesting is this Guardian writer was clearly drunk, right? And he started saying about, he's not funny, he's terrible. And we were all saying, have you seen him perform? And he was saying, no, I just know he's terrible, he's awful. And I could wipe the floor with him. If you put me on a stage, I could do 10 minutes. And so I said, OK, I've got a comedy night. Come next month, May the 10th. Booked, bang. Then he deleted all his tweets and blocked me. But the thing is, this is it.
And I'll also take that guy on, by the way. If he wants to take me on at Top Secret Comedy, 10 minutes, Barry. I'll wipe the floor with him. I'll do permanent damage. Metaphorically.
Not a great challenge, though. He's a non-stand-up.
Well, he's
who
a
thinks he can
former
be funny.
stand-up.
He used to do stand-up, but
he failed at it, though. That's what I'm saying.
He says that
Some people have built whole websites and careers off that.
Well, he said that even though I'm a failed comic, which he did concede, I'm still better than Leo Kearse. This comic I haven't actually seen.
Right.
So it was a very weird, drunken rant. And to be honest, I feel for him in a way because he obviously didn't. If he was sober, he wouldn't have done that.
But the internet is like booze. It makes people brave.
Yeah.
It does.
It does.
And at night, someone's at home, he's alone. Clearly, this person's going to die alone. So he's at home thinking, my life is coming to an end. I have no one to, abuse except you. And there you are, ready to jump on it. It's you. You're addicted. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I was trying to reason with him. I was trying to be nice.
Tries to reason with people
I do.
on Twitter. That's
which is ridiculous.
I don't come back with insult. I was being very, very nice to him.
Can I just say...
He blocked me. So there we go. That's his right.
Despite my brilliant satirical points moments ago, can I just say that actually I think we should bury Twitter in a hole in the desert and never get it out?
Absolutely,
it's an absolute disaster.
Well, let's take a look at another example as to why social media can be so bad. This is a story this week. I don't know if you saw this. There was a restaurant that hosted a lunch. It was a lunch organised by J.K. Rowling. And she'd invited various feminists along, people like Julie Bindel, Helen Joyce, Kathleen Stock, who was there, Alison Bailey, I think, was there, Suzanne Moore. Anyway, a lot of people, a lot of prominent figures. And she was criticised. Let's have a look at some of the photos. Do we have any of the photos of this? There they are.
Bunch of lefties, look at them all.
There we go. And there's Maya Forstater there in the middle.
Was Emma Watson there?
Emma Watson was not there.
She was taking the photo.
Where's Daniel Radcliffe? I can't see.
If we've got any other, I don't know if we've got any other photos, but look, the point about this is there is a group of women, feminists, predominantly overwhelmingly left-wing feminists.
Lesbians.
A lot of lesbians. You don't need to whisper that word, Scott. It's perfectly fine.
I'm sure.
A part of a group called Get the L Out, so it's a lesbian group. So all of this, and they're obviously just having a good time and having a boozy lunch and having fun and getting drunk. And people were absolutely livid, and people were talking about how angry they were at this coven of TERFs, these trans-exclusionally radical, which is a new word for witch, by the way. And people just absolutely furious that women should have a good time and enjoy themselves. I was absolutely baffled at the level of hysteria, which can only be explained by Twitter, right? Because people don't behave like this in the real world, do they, Nick?
Have we got that tweet? Didn't a comedian cry about it? Didn't a comedian break
Rosie
down?
Jones did, yes. Said that she's had a mad, angry cry because she said, why is there so much hate in the world? And I'm like, why have you decided that these women are hateful just because you don't agree with their perspective? It's really
that particular
bizarre.
comedian also called the lovely Mark Dolan a very, very bad word. One of the worst swear words you can do.
Which you're not going to repeat.
Not going to repeat
now.
it now.
No.
But you can use your own imagination. And he's one of the nicest guys in show business. Admittedly, that's saying you're like the tallest dwarf. I mean, it's a horrible business. But Mark is one of the nicest guys. I've known him 10 years, and I couldn't believe that. But this is what I said about comedians.
I saw some abuse about that photo, which I think it's sweet. I think they're just so happy.
They do.
They're having a nice lunch and people complaining, these women can afford to eat while others are starving. It's like, well, no, they're just going to lunch, you lunatic. And anyway, also, they were complaining about the cell phones they showed on display proudly.
They were saying, look at the cell phones, they're so expensive. Like J.K. Rowling's got a few quid in the bank.
She's done all right by herself, and she's also donated a lot of money. I just thought, I feel bad because I wasn't there. It looks like they're having fun. I wouldn't mind showing a piece of fish for those ladies.
It's so weird as well because J.K. Rowling is one of the few billionaires who is no longer a billionaire because she's given so much of her private wealth to charity.
Yeah.
And yet these people think she's this monster.
Is it because she wrote books about kids with wands and dragons and stuff, and she put these childhood illusions in adults' heads, and she made them think that they were important, and then suddenly they realize that they're not the most important thing to her, that she's got other things going on? Do you think it's that?
That's a psychological approach. I mean, they hate her because she believes that there's a difference between men and women, which happens to be true.
Yeah. They hate Rowling in this bizarre way, which is awful and totally undeserved. But this is a general thing of Twitter. If you post any good news or anything nice or anything at all, really, people are immediately... Jacob Rees-Mogg today, perhaps not everyone's favourite person, but he merely tweeted,
hallelujah. Easter.
Yes, he did it, exactly. He did an Easter tweet, perfectly nice, he always does it. And people just piled on him in the most disgusting way, just saying, oh, you're not a proper Christian. This is their new line of attack. They won't just say, oh, we hate you or whatever. Like, you're not a proper Christian. Suddenly they become Christians for the day. It's much like the people who said, oh, all the socialists saying Twitter's a private company, guys. They suddenly become free market people. This is why they want to use it against you.
But this is why Facebook is better, I think, because everything on Facebook is everyone's got a great life. It's all about how good everything's going.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes me feel bad about myself. It's why I tune into Twitter after reading Facebook, because on Twitter people hate each other. I'm like, oh God, thank God that hatred's still there. It feels a bit too, sweet and huggy.
And on Instagram, everyone's got a yacht.
Yes.
So that's the next level.
And on TikTok, I feel like a pedo. So I don't know where to go.
Let's move on quickly. Coming up on Free Speech Nation, by the way, we're going to have an exclusive clip from my podcast this week with journalist and author James Bloodworth. So please do not go away.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. On my upcoming podcast episode, I'm joined by James Bloodworth. In our conversation, we spoke about James's groundbreaking book on life as a low-paid worker in modern-day Britain, and also discussed whether Labour is still the party of the working class.
So, if you have movements of the left which are railing against white men, why would you alienate that constituency of working-class people? Why would you not kind of want to bring people of all ethnicities together from, say, a working class socioeconomic background? Because you need to do that to actually change the system. You can't just... this is why I feel like it is almost in the interest of capitalism to actually divide people up like this. To say that, you can't... If you're black, you cannot relate to someone who's white. If you're a woman, you cannot possibly understand... Or if you're a man, you cannot possibly understand what the experience is like to be a woman. I think we all have lots of things more in common than we don't. Even people from very different backgrounds. And I think the job of politics is to emphasise the universal, to emphasize what we share in common, so that then you can come together and actually change the system and get justice.
And that was the bedrock of all sorts of civil rights movements, and even Stonewall in its original form was about trying to find what we have in common, saying sort of gay people aren't these alien things, they're just like you. Whereas of course now Stonewall's flipped the other way and says, no, we're completely different, we're not talking to anyone. So that strikes me as a real problem, because all traditionally left-wing movements have understood that this is the way forward. Mark Liller wrote that book on the Once and Future Liberal, and talked about how when left-wing movements, particularly in politics, really tie themselves into this identitarian knot, it never translates to success at the ballot box.
No, I mean it can't, because it's about success at the ballot box is about building coalitions, and that flies in the face of this, like commissar-like policing of people's differences. So I think the internet's made this far worse, because you have people who have no authority in real life who seem to get off on policing the discourse online. So they will cancel people who step outside of that or say something wrong, and it just makes things even more creates even more division, which flies in the face of actually bringing about real change. It's like a game to those people.
So and that I would say, I'm really interested in what you said about how there being multiple forms of left wing, and to the extent that I think it's become so confusing to people. So if I talk about left wing politics people, they will assume I mean putting pronouns in your bio, flying a rainbow flag on Twitter, and being against free speech. For instance, those would be, but that's not what, to me, left-wing means at all. So where do you how do you identify? Where do you put yourself now?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, that reminded me of something. I remember Christopher Hitchens said that when he was at university, the demand was like cops off campus, and now it's like cops on campus.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was quite amusing. I would still place myself on the left. I mean, I don't really identify with groups. I just think my main interest really is I still see that class and economics define where someone ends up in life and have the biggest influence on life generally, and politics. So for me, class is the most important thing. So that, to me, I'm on the left. If everyone else thinks differently on the left, I still would say I'm on the left, because I think that's traditionally what the left is interested itself in.
Right, but then isn't there an argument for saying that, rather than say there are multiple forms of left wing and accept that, say actually no, there aren't. The identitarian movement isn't a left-wing movement, because the body of work of left-wing writing and literature over the decades is very much firmly grounded within class and money, and we can't get away from that. This identitarian thing strikes me as quite a relatively new phenomenon, and for me it feels more right-wing, because it's obsessed more with middle-class concerns. So isn't there a case for just saying you're not left-wing?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you insofar as it is, I think, a middle-class thing. It's very compatible with capitalism. It doesn't really challenge the status quo. But I think it's slightly fruitless to get into, you're really left-wing, you're not, because it's, at the end of the day, it's not a religious movement. You don't have this text where it's like, this is the one true. I mean, there used to be the debates about Marxism and this isn't real Marxism. It's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because it's like there is no one true word of the left or one true word of the right. So it's kind of like what the majority of the left thinks at the time, that is the left. I would just say I have a different interpretation of what's good for society. And
I wonder if it might be best just to dispel with left and right altogether. I mean, because, if I get into a discussion about whether I'm left-wing or right-wing, I don't subscribe to an ideology. I don't let someone else make my rules up for me. Some of my views are traditionally left-wing, some are probably traditionally right-wing, and I don't care about that. And so maybe we just get rid of them altogether, because it's tribalistic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is. So it is becoming harder to kind of pin down those things. So if somebody asks me, are you on the left or right, I'll say left, but they'll often make assumptions then and think I think things that I don't think. So think I have a problem with free speech, or even so. I think that I'll somehow think that the problem in Europe now is NATO or something, because there are lots of people on the left who unfortunately do say things like that. So I mean, it is becoming harder to kind of define, but at the same time, I do think that the labels still have some use, because I do think there are, so Bernie Sanders, for example, those left-wing politicians who do kind of focus still on traditional issues, and it does have some value, but it's more complicated than just left is. For me, like left is good, right is bad, or something. That's just, or left thinks this, right thinks this, because it is quite fluid at the moment, it seems.
Hugely. I mean, at the time of the 2016 election, I was contacted I'd done a number of satirical videos relating to Trump, And so people in America had contacted me saying that they had been Sanders supporters. When he dropped out, they voted for Trump, right? So that, and people can't get their heads around this. That actually, this is why I often feel that the division is redundant now, particularly because Labour is clearly no longer the party of the working class. I mean, that's absolutely clear from the voting record, isn't it? Or am I wrong about that?
I do think there is. So I don't want to do the thing where people redefine the working class to suit what's their favoured electorate. So I mean, one of the things that the Corbynistas did after the 2019 election was they tried to say that the real working class is like PhD students, out of work PhD students. And yeah, I mean, there was this movement because fewer traditional working class people were voting Labour. There was a swing towards the Conservatives. So there were people in the Labour movement, and John Cruddas has written about this very eloquently. There were people in the Labour movement who said, well, actually, the real working class today is the people who vote for Labour. By definition, they're working class. And it's just like defining working class by what your ideological beliefs are rather than by your socio-economic background.
Yeah.
I do think that Labour does still have a quite big working class constituency. I don't think the red wall will stay blue come the next election. I think so much is happening at the moment with the economics of Britain, for example. I think with inflation, with cost of living crisis. I mean, I do think that left-wing activists are wildly out of touch with the concerns of the man and woman in the street in those communities. But at the same time, I think people do tend still to vote with their wallets when they're squeezed this much. I think that will make a big difference come the election.
I generally agree, but I do think the impact of the culture war is underestimated insofar as
maybe
Boris Johnson coming out and clearly expressing what a man is and what a woman is has far more of an impact than people realise. I think the fact that Keir Starmer and his cohort flounder whenever they're asked the question. I think people think, well, these are just sides. This is a sideshow to govern. This is just cultural nonsense that no one cares about. Actually, women do care that you can't define them. You know, that's 50% of the electorate.
Yeah, no, I find it hard to know at this point what... I think some things in the culture war are just... People don't take much notice of them. I think this issue people do take more notice of because it's so fundamental, isn't it? And especially when it comes into areas that are supposed to be science-based. So when it comes into the healthcare sector, when you have people talking about men getting pregnant and things in hospitals, I think... Look, I'm all for empathy when it comes to trans people. I think their rights should be respected. I think we should have compassion. But at the same time, I don't think when you're in a setting, say sports setting or in a hospital, you have to also acknowledge biological reality. And I don't think that is incompatible with compassion and empathy.
And you can listen to my whole conversation with James Bloodworth on my podcast, which is called Free Speech Nation, the podcast. That's available very shortly. It's now 8 o'clock. You are watching Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's talk about some other issues from this last week. How about this? So this is an interesting one. Diane Abbott could have a park named in tribute to her. It's been reported that a London park named after four-time Prime Minister William Gladstone could be called Diane Abbott Park. This is Brent Borough Council in northwest London. They've described Gladstone as a historical figure whose views in association with the slave trade are inappropriate. Gladstone's father, you see, was a slave trader. The council asked school children as young as 5 to come up with a new name for the park. Clearly, they're very much into Labour politics, these young people. What do you think? Diane Abbott Park has got a ring to it? That?
Yeah, well, so here's my concern with this. I read about this, and the kids were asked to name the park, and they somehow came up with names like Diversity Park and things like this. And these are kids, like some of them as young as 5, like you said. When I was young, we'd have called it something like Pooh Park or something. That's the thing that would have come into our heads. So I question whether these kids really would have come up with that on their own. That's my only concern. If they're 5 to 13, teach like, hey kids, what do you think? Oh, you think you should call it the things we've been teaching them? Okay, so that's
It's kind of interesting. It's like when you see little kids at like Extinction Rebellion protests with signs saying no to deforestation, and you think, you didn't spell that. You don't know what's going on. Someone put that in your hand, didn't they? It's interesting because I was just talking in the break to members of the audience who were asking whether my panel are left-wing or right-wing. We have Nick, who is very much centre-right, Scott, who's very much on the left.
I'm a broken wing, actually, obviously.
A broken wing.
I see myself more as a sort of counter-cultural figure.
Do you think, though, that this kind of story... Because
yeah, right. Like Lenin.
Do you think that this kind of story, this kind of cultural story, really fits into the right-left divide? It's interesting that they went for a left-wing politician, Diane Abbott.
Yeah, I think that they are trying to show their own coolness in how connected they are to what's going on around them.
Okay, but
I mean, I think, park names, city names, street names, people's names change all the time. Why not change the park's name? Why not? It's fine.
It does seem a bit unfair on Gladstone insofar as he thought that slavery was a great evil. He was unequivocal about it.
He did, and he was quite powerful and quite well remembered. So it's odd to me that they're using him as an example to change.
His dad.
Yeah, but don't judge me by my father, because it would end my marriage. Yeah, I think it's a strange. It's a big responsibility to put on Diane too, and she's a lovely woman, and she's quite smart and well achieved great things. So
she
again,
absolutely has. It's very interesting. No, wait, I'll come to you in a minute, right winger. I think the thing about this is that it is interesting with that, because I think Diane Abbott gets a lot of flack. Sometimes she says some bizarre things which are worthy of criticism because she's a very powerful person.
And we all do,
But
so.
she did achieve things at a time in politics at a time when black people in politics were scarce,
and women,
yes. Right. So that merits some consideration.
It does.
I think. But I think with this, what I'm finding interesting is the attack on Gladstone for something his father did. Also, even if Gladstone had held views that we no longer find acceptable, that's because he was born a long time ago.
Yes.
And people thought differently in a different time, right? This isn't rocket science.
I'm not trying to diss Diana, but I agreed with her over the Plan B restrictions. She was one of the few Labour people I think wanted to get rid of them, as I recall. Wasn't that right?
I don't know.
There was I think it was that. There was a policy where a very small amount of Labour voted against. I think it was the Plan B restrictions. And
so did Corbyn.
Corbyn is an independent and a few Labour. So look, I can agree with Diane Abbott on some things, but I do think there's a bit of a difference in stature between Gladstone and Diane Abbott. It's a bit renaming, Winston Churchill Gardens to like Owen Jones Lawn or something. There is a slight.
But no one's
go Owen Jones again.
But I think they're going for somebody who is an iconic figure to a certain part of the community, and to the Labour community, especially a very specific part, she's a real hero. And they're looking for a hero. And to be honest, they're difficult to find nowadays. And I don't think they're going to call it Boris Johnson Park, no matter how many terms he serves.
Well, it does politicise it, though, doesn't it? If you choose a Labour MP rather than a Conservative MP.
Well, the whole issue is going to be political because it was named after a political icon. It will be named after one now.
The children came up with Diane Abbott.
No, absolutely not. And they were trained before they answered with subject matter about Black Lives Matter and subject matter about the abuse of certain other communities in Britain.
Yes.
So they were educated on those subjects first, and then said, "So what should we name the park?"
Well, you say educated. I mean, they were talking to them about effectively the precepts of critical race theory. They were talking about anti-racism to 5-year-olds and structural racism. These things that, again, when we were talking to Alka earlier, are highly contested. But of course, they were explaining it to the kids as though it's the truth. Well, no, it probably isn't. And that's called indoctrination, isn't it?
Right. And then when you feed them candy, if they get the right answer, they're basically dogs. So
that is true.
Look, again, why not her? Why not the?
Or why not just name something else after her and leave the name of the park as it is, and then everyone's happy.
Could be, yeah. Or,
name a garden centre after her.
It's going to be, that everything splits a room now, though.
Right.
My favorite furniture has always been a room divider, so I feel very at home in the current circumstance of the community and society. So everything's going to be an argument.
They could name some sort of mathematical award after her or something. The Diane Abbott Maths Award.
That's mean, Nick. That's mean.
We all know what you're referring to. Yes, we all heard it again and again and again.
No, she's not great at maths, let's be honest. But,
the only thing that bothered me about Diane Abbott, I'm sure she's a very nice person, is that when she said that, on balance, Mao did more good than harm. I took a little bit of exception to that, because the whole 80 million killed thing, you know what I mean?
It's a bit of a glitch.
Yeah.
Call it the Mao Park and see what people do.
Yeah, do that.
Could be that, yeah. Or the Ukrainian Park, Ukrainian Square. Maybe that would be positive.
Zelensky Square. Everyone would love that, wouldn't they? They'd agree with
Zelensky Square. What? No one's going to name anything after me, or certainly not you.
They might eventually. Yeah.
They might name a disease after you.
That would be nice. I would actually rather like that.
Yeah.
You've got Doyle.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that.
I've been Doyled.
So it's been revealed that women can be strip searched by transgender police officers who are born as men but identify as female, and suspects could be accused of causing a hate incident if they refuse. So these are new guidelines, say an officer should be considered a woman or man from the moment they transition. So this is to do with self-identification. Now, this, of course, raises all sorts of problems. If you're a woman who's experienced, say, sexual assault, and there are good reasons why you want women's-only spaces, rape, refuge crisis centres, that kind of thing, and surely it is reasonable to expect that if you're being strip-searched by an officer, that it's by someone of the same sex. Is that not reasonable?
I think that's probably reasonable, and I think that probably is a good idea and solves a lot of problems in the future. So let's just do that.
But But they won't do that because I think the gender identity ideology has basically just been taken on board, largely due to Stonewall, has been taken on board in all of our major institutions, including law enforcement, and it's not being questioned. And again, we come to back to this point. We need to be able to have discussions about this. If that's your view that we should implement those policies, then why not? That's great, but let's have a conversation about it.
Maybe they should pay the police better so they don't have to offer guys these perks.
Oh, goodness me.
No, I'm just I'm trying to make a joke out of something that's very serious to a lot of people, obviously. But I think the truth is that yes, what you described. I mean, you want to be strip searched by someone like at the airport when you're going through. Of course, that's what you expect.
It's the same thing.
And want is a strange word. You don't really want to be strip searched by anyone, do you? Ideally.
Well,
speaking for me, anyway.
Okay.
What do you think about this, Nick? Do you think that there is, I mean, there's look. Obviously we want to treat people with respect. If someone identifies a certain way, that's up to them. That's their business. But when it comes to, again, it's this thing about, like going back to the monsoon changing rooms, it's all very well according dignity and respect to every individual and the choices that they make. But when it comes to an impact on other people, specifically related to the reality of biological sex differences, then it starts to matter, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know me, Andrew, I'm a feminist, and I'm just laughing
the
out
audience
loud.
don't understand what a ridiculous statement that is.
Of course I have. It's contentious, but of course I have to stand up for women's right to safety. I just think it has to take precedence in issues of safety. That's my opinion. Makes me a big turf.
I mean, I want to be groped by someone of the same sex.
But that's a totally different issue, Scott.
Well, when I say groped, you know what I mean. But
I know exactly what you mean. That's the problem.
No, but I really think it's strange that this has even become an issue when clearly there are enough police officers of that person's gender.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, surely...
Why do we need someone who's not of their gender?
Interesting. OK, well, anyway, let's carry on. So this is a story about the 15-year-old racing driver, 15-year-old racing driver, who's been sacked by his team after he was accused of making a Nazi salute. OK, so this is a Russian driver who's been investigated by tournament organisers after he appeared to do a Nazi salute on the podium before laughing. He has apologised and said he was not supporting fascism, and it was a traditional Italian gesture because he races under the Italian flag. Have we got the footage of this? This would be interesting to see. Let's have a look. Now, there's I believe he's there in the middle. Here we go. 15, by the way. Now, that's unequivocal, I would say. But he's laughing about it. Is it a joke? Is it just a joke?
Yes.
Do we think? What do you think?
It's the Mussolini gesture, which is also illegal in Italy.
Yes, it is.
So what he's doing is he's playing to his friends in the back of the room.
Absolutely.
And they've probably said, I dare you to do it. And he said, well, I'm 15 and I'm white and I'm male. I can do what I like. So he did what he liked.
I mean, he's a kid, isn't he? And this is the thing. I think
he's showing off.
I think his reaction is clear that he's not being.
Like where Will Smith laughed at the joke, and then the wife got in the ear, and then he punched the comic. I think he at first was just kind of playing along and being kind of the funny guy for a minute, and he likes it, and he'll do it again, like serial killers, because they like it.
Will Smith is a Nazi.
I don't think that's what Scott is saying.
I'm saying what happened was I think that he was just kind of trying to play along and be cool and groovy.
Yeah. Well, with this,
so what do you think? I mean, is this like if you go into internet culture, discourse servers, that kind of thing, which I've just glimpsed at, and their humour.
You run several forums.
I have several. Their humour is very dark. It's very about pushing things to the edge, and they're very predominantly young, much younger than me. This is people of his age. I would err on the side of giving him the benefit of the doubt there. I don't think that's an explicit support of...
Well...
Or is it? I don't know.
Firstly, he claimed it was a normal Italian gesture. So
that's nonsense.
I sent it to my Italian friend just to check. He hasn't got back to me, but I'm guessing it's not. But it does seem more like, especially from the laughter after it. And it doesn't help that he looks just like a member of Hitler Youth, doesn't he? He had incredibly blonde hair. It was not helping him at all.
No.
Yeah, I think it is most likely that he did it as some kind of bet or a laugh. Ideally, we shouldn't probably destroy his life, and he's only 15, but yeah.
It's wrecked now. That's it for 40 years.
You think that's it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, well, we shall see.
It's too bad.
Our final talking point for the moment, this comes from Liverpool, where a men's-only farmers group has been accused of sexism because it won't let women join. So this is the Liverpool Agricultural Discussion Society. Sounds fun. It's known as LADS, and it says male agricultural workers need a safe space to discuss mental health, and at a recent vote, refused to allow women to attend meetings. It's caused this backlash online, specifically from women who say that the agricultural sector is hard enough to get into. What do we think about this? I mean, that sounds like a fun Fun meeting, right?
It does sound like a lot of laughs. I'm not quite sure why the women just don't form their own group. If the guys are saying, look, we need this so that we can kind of bond together around the difficulty of farming.
It's called LADS, isn't it?
Yes.
The acronym is deliberate. And
Can't they just leave it and get a woman called WADS or WADS or whatever her ladies and just, do their own
Well, they haven't got a good enough acronym, maybe.
Yeah, it's not a good one, is it? MADS? Right?
MADS.
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
Okay, what do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I didn't know about this one, but I know about a similar one someone was telling me about recently called sort of Proper Blokes or something, where the men get together to have a walk and chat about things. Yeah, I think it's completely reasonable. I don't see why we shouldn't be allowed to do it. In the past, people from my background would have gone to working men's clubs, and people of other backgrounds would have gone to sort of posh men's clubs to smoke cigars and talk about the situation in India. And it was a simpler time. We had men's clubs.
Simpler for them, not so much for Indian people.
I'm just being silly, but we had men's clubs, we had men's spaces. I mean, I play football every week, like you said. That's like a man's thing. Men should do things together with other men, like bonding things, whatever we're going to call them. I think that's totally normal and good. And the idea that every single space has to be inclusive of everyone is nonsense.
Well, I mean, J.K. Rowling had her women's lunch.
Exactly.
She did. How dare she, by the way?
I'm still angry I wasn't invited, but I also, it's kind of like when gay bars became inclusive and all sorts of people started showing up. You know, women arrived and brought their boyfriends, and suddenly you were dancing in a circle of all sorts of different people.
Yeah.
And it was kind of great, and it made the idea that a gay bar maybe is obsolete or a gay bookstore might be obsolete. But there are some people that still want that space to be particular.
Yeah, I mean,
and I understand that too. There's a reason for ghettos. Ghettos exist, they're not all bad things.
Yeah, they're not all bad things. I mean, I've been to gay-only events a lot, and they're quite fun, right?
Yeah. I saw you there in a towel.
Yeah.
And that was, I'm glad you shaved your chest. It was very thoughtful of you. But those things are necessary for certain people that want them.
Yeah.
And if you want an all-inclusive group of farmers, then form that too.
And if men can't get together, just men, how are they ever going to say their real opinions? Do you know what I mean? That's no one on that. But
what?
Men will, you know.
Yeah.
Men will say different
You're
things.
saying men dissemble in front of women.
Women will say different things in just women groups, and they should absolutely have those. And men will be more relaxed in certain cases.
I'm included in both, and it's a lot of pressure, I have to say.
Yeah,
because women unload a lot of information on gay men's labs, a lot of information, and then it's interesting too, because then you hear the heterosexual male version of that, and the complete opposite, and you think, wow, this world is never going to come together.
I think,
ever.
look, let people just do what they want to do. If they want to form groups and exclude it, I don't mind being excluded.
What group is this? This is a fun little group.
This is a fun group.
Yeah,
exactly.
To make the argument for them, look, the idea of like men's only spaces was like it's where all the power happens, and so women should be allowed into it. But I don't think the lads' agricultural Liverpool society, whatever it is really where the power base in society.
I don't think that's a powerful movement.
If you're
anyway,
onion, maybe, but that's about it.
After the break on Free Speech Nation, are the information panels on paintings in museums and galleries becoming a little, well, for want of a better word, woke? We'll explain why this Manet masterpiece is causing a stir. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. The Courtauld Gallery in London has been criticised after it placed what's been branded a woke warning alongside one of the most famous paintings in its collection. A message alongside Manet's Bar at Folies Bergère says the woman in the painting's enigmatic expression is unsettling, especially as she appears to be interacting with a male customer. This is the Mail Online's history correspondent Harry Howard, who has been covering this story. He joins me now. Harry Howard, everyone. So what's been going on here? What is the reason behind the message? What is it that the gallery curators are trying to do here?
Well, it seems to be they're trying to it's a kind of woke attempt to call out misogyny.
Right.
But it seems kind of ill-judged because it doesn't seem to be that it's really the barmaid that's the main subject of the painting, and actually in focusing on the man, they're kind of almost centering the male gaze, really.
So you think that this is actually drawing attention to that potential interpretation of the painting in their warning?
Yeah.
So why is it at the moment that there seems to be this standard thing in galleries and museums? You know, there's always been explanatory panels next to paintings which offer a background and details about the work of art. But increasingly I'm seeing panels that are inviting you to interpret it in a particular way, one that is very specifically ideologically driven. Am I wrong about this?
No, I mean, there was the Hogarth exhibition at the Tate Britain, which ended last month. And I had a few friends that went there, and they all said, you know, that they were just felt bombarded by the messaging, which was essentially that the slavery, the sexual violence, racism, anti-Semitism, that was allegedly in Hogarth's paintings. His self-portrait of him sitting on a wooden chair. They couldn't not mention the fact that mahogany was possibly shipped from slave regions. So, you know, it's very much making the viewer, they're trying to impress a view on the viewer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very specific, I mean, that is a particularly egregious example, I think, the idea that, you know, there's a chair in this painting and at this time would have been sourced through slavery. I mean, it's tenuous in the extreme, really. Do you think people are reacting against this? Do you think people who consume art, they quite like having the space to interpret the work themselves, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, with the barmaid in the Manet painting, I mean, surely what's most interesting is what's she thinking, not the man that you can barely see in the side of the painting. So, you know, we should be allowed to sort of think for ourselves rather than having lefty curators kind of shove views down our throat.
Now, it's interesting. I don't know if we can get the image of the painting back up on the screen, but it'd be interesting to look at this and see the man is a marginal figure within that work. And like you say, there is something quite enigmatic about the face of the woman, and we don't know for sure what she's thinking. And that is that lacuna where we can bring our own interpretation into the work. And I often feel sometimes, I deliberately don't read those panels, you know, because I want to come up with my own views on the painting. This talks specifically about the male gaze. You can see there in the top right corner the image of the gentleman looking at her. And that is an interesting aspect of that painting as well. But this view of the male gaze, it's old, isn't it? I mean, I remember this from when I was at university and studying English. And the male gaze was something, but what does that actually mean? What are they trying to say there?
I don't know. I think it's. I think the historian E.P. Thompson warned us against the condescension of posterity, i.e., looking at the past with a 21st century gaze, and trying to put our morals onto the past. And it seems to be that that's what they've done. They try to shoehorn sexism in essentially when it isn't really there.
Do you think do you not think, though, that interpretation is in of itself valid? Because art opens the door to all forms of interpretations, doesn't it?
I think absolutely it's valid. It just has to, you know, it's got a time and a place. And I just don't think this particular painting is, you could possibly have a sexist interpretation, in my view.
And do you think this is very much specifically of our moment, that people are responding to this very sort of hermetic moment in time, and this will all go away and this will change, and ultimately people will stop trying to push this agenda in every single aspect of public life?
I'm not sure. I think it seems to have almost gathered pace. I mean, we've had the National Gallery has had a 3-year review into linking paintings to slavery. We've had obviously the National Trust with linking Churchill's Chartwell to the slave trade because he was Secretary of State for the colonies.
Yes.
And hundreds of other properties. So I don't think it's something that's going to go away. It just seems to have. This is just the latest thing. You know.
It seems to have infected the arts in particular and the creative industries. And you know, I'm from that background. I know a lot of comedians, writers, artists, directors, and they all seem to be following. They're in lockstep on this view. Why is it that the people you would expect to be the most free thinkers in society seem to be the most conformist at the moment?
Well, it seems to be maybe the way that the left is going. I don't know, but it does seem to be, you know, that's the way it's going. I mean, surely maybe Titania McGrath would have a great joy.
She would have a view on this.
Yes.
What do you did write a satirical sort of tongue-in-cheek article, didn't you, about suggestions of other works that might need these kind of, well, let's call them trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah. So Picasso's Guernica. Obviously depicts the Nazis bombing of the Spanish town of the same name, and you might want to have a scenes of distress trigger warning on that.
Yes, you would.
Van Gogh's self-portrait, The Bandaged Ear, obviously he cut his ear off. You might want to have a self-harm one there. Obviously Michelangelo's David, he's naked, you know, may contain nuts. You know, also, well, yeah, there's several others, so, you know.
There's an interesting thing about this, though, isn't there? So the concept of the trigger warning, you know, to an extent it makes sense if you're a parent, right? And if you've got a warning on a film or something saying this contains this kind of content, and it's good to know as a parent, you know, but there's a kind of infantilizing quality about trigger warnings that are aimed at adults, particularly in universities, because what they're effectively saying is that you're not really an adult, you need us to look after you. But also art and literature deal with difficult themes, don't they? That's part of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've been dealing with trigger warnings since I was a student journalist. You know, we had to, the student union used to try and shoehorn them into our newspaper. So they're obviously not old, they're not new. But, you know, they are quite infantilizing because they, you know, basically say this might upset you when, you know, it's unlikely to. So.
And it's also, you know, I will defer to the judgment of expertise on this, but cognitive behavioural therapists know that this is actually the worst thing you can do. If someone suffered trauma, is to completely isolate them from any reference to that trauma is actually the opposite of what you should be doing. I mean, this is what I have read and have been told. Is that not right?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's, you're almost making them think about that thing by saying warning, whatever. You know.
Yes.
Just let them make their own mind up. You know, it goes back to the same thing of curators kind of shoving views down our throat rather than letting us interpret it for what it is.
And it is a particular worry with art, isn't it? Because I think this is the field of human experience where people are going to express all manner of things and fully across the spectrum of the potential of human thought. And if we have these narrow conditions, these ideas that this is the way things either must be created or must be interpreted, then that just limits the entire field. I mean, is it too much to say that this is the collapse of art if we go down this road? I like to be histrionic from time to time.
Well, yes. I mean, it's worrying in the sense that there doesn't seem to be much pushback, and it seems to be all our major cultural institutions. To some extent, they do seem to have a mild disdain for the things they're looking after. You know, maybe that's unfair, but I don't know. But you know, it's worrying just that the direction is worrying.
What do you think about, it's not just the art and what is depicted within the art, but this new fascination with, are the artists themselves morally pure? So there's been sort of a lot of discussion about Picasso's behaviour. People have described him as sexually predatory, for instance. Obviously, the Eric Gill statue of Ariel and Prospero at the BBC was attacked with a hammer because he was not a nice person. He did some very terrible things during his lifetime. Why do you think there is this idea now that artists must be morally pure by our standards of today? Why has that come about, do you think?
I don't know. It seems to be a kind of a twisted form of religion, almost. You know, like just searching for purity, and you know, no one is free of sin, essentially. So it's like, where does it stop? Obviously, you know, even Karl Marx, he seems to be free of this because he was pretty dodgy. So.
Well, I would say that's an interesting point, isn't it? That often this is directed in one way politically. I mean, Karl Marx said some explicitly racist things that, you know, would no way. I don't see people trying to cancel him. I don't see people trying to take down his bust at Highgate Cemetery. This isn't happening.
No.
So it's one way.
Yeah, it is one way. I mean, obviously with the BLM protests 3 years ago, there was 2 years ago with Churchill's statue, and then obviously a cascade of statues that were targeted. You know, it just seemed to be that they were old and white. That was the thing they had in common. and disregard everything they might have done or said. It was just all about that.
Well, I don't think this is going away anytime soon because this is going to go on and on, especially when it comes to the arts. But thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you. I should say we did contact the Courtauld Gallery for a comment. This was their response. So in a statement, they said all of the Courtauld Gallery's labels were reviewed and rewritten in advance of the reopening of the gallery in November 2021. They therefore reflect and acknowledge the latest scholarship as is relevant for one of the world's preeminent centres for the study of art history. After the break on Free Speech Nation, the Archbishop of Canterbury has criticised the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Was he right to do so? See you in a minute.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So we're going to start by talking about this story that caught my eye this week, quite literally. So this is a senior British Transport Police officer has called on people to be prosecuted if they stare at fellow passengers on the London Underground. So there's now posters on the tube trains that say intrusive staring of a sexual nature is sexual harassment and is not tolerated. Scott, you're quite into staring, aren't you?
Well, I do like watching people. I don't spend much time on my phone on the tube. Just so much people watching it happen. I didn't know it was wrong. I thought it was okay. It's in one place where you're all in this confined space, so let's just stare at each other. Why not? And observe one another.
But is there a moment when, looking out of interest, well, that's interesting what that person's doing, tips over into just creepy and predatory?
I'm sure it does. I mean, not my. I'll be 60 in a few months. As a 60-year-old gay man, I'm aware that I'm completely invisible. No one even sees me. They don't care, right? And so I take advantage of that, I guess. And also,
I slip through the cracks.
Yeah, well, so to speak. And also, I feel like on a crowded train, they're not even going to really notice much.
It does feel like it's impossible to police, though, doesn't it? I mean, how could this happen, where someone goes to the authorities and say, "Oh, I want to press charges. This person looked at me." How are you going to? How are you going to prove that?
Well, they're breaking the code of London, which is you never look someone directly in the eye.
That's true.
It's a sort of Vietnam 1,000-yard stare at nothing. That's what you're supposed to, or just look down. You know what I mean? Very English.
Yes.
But what's actually thinking about this? It's quite ironic that a sort of ultra safety-ish, progressive type idea is going back all the way back to the Bible, because in Matthew it says you shouldn't even look at another woman with lust if you're married. That's already adultery. So we're going back to the idea that staring is sexual harassment. That's an ancient idea in a way, isn't it?
I knew you'd shoehorn the Bible.
I thought I would since it's Easter.
Just because it's Easter.
And I didn't know we were doing this story, so I just thought.
I only use the Bible for yoga as a yoga prop, so I'm not really sure. But I do know that I have seen women on the tube who have been harassed a few times. But usually that's by someone who's so psychotic and so out of control. They're not just staring; they're lunging at them.
This is the sort of person, though, that if they saw a poster saying "Don't stare," they're not going to pay any heed to that, are they?
They'll probably tear it down, or they'll see it as an encouragement. Wait, is that telling me to stare? I'm going to stare more. So I really think that it's kind of, like Nick said, in this country especially, it's kind of a non-issue. Although it's obviously some rule they're trying to create out of something that's happened.
Yeah, but there's this thing about, ultimately, if someone's staring at you in a creepy way on the tube, then you can just move away or leave.
Change carriages. Yeah,
that's what I do.
Sometimes they follow you. I have to say, I've traveled with women a lot in the U.S. and here for comedy stuff, and I do know that, I'm sorry, men are creepy. They are. Men's idea.
Not all men.
No,
right?
but men's idea oftentimes of what is appropriate behavior, it's not similar to what a woman's idea is.
Right.
And so I think this is merely to protect people that are in vulnerable positions.
Well, I come back to this point that I just don't think a poster is going to make a difference. Because I think people like that, who stare in a sort of predatory way, know they're doing something wrong anyway.
It's interesting you brought it up, because I did see it for the first time coming home from work on Saturday night from a gig, and it did make me self-conscious.
Did it?
It did. I stared anyway, but I did it like this, yoo-hoo. So I think they noticed me even less.
That's more coquettish.
Do you think so?
Yeah, that's endearing.
I think it is too. Oftentimes when some guy's kind of sporting on the tube, just hanging out, I take a photo of him. Is that wrong? And then I share it on the internet. I just think, hot guy of the day, #1.
Yeah, I would say that's very wrong. And I would say,
if I saw someone took a photo of me on the tube and called me a hot guy, I mean, it won't happen, but it would be so.
You'd be flattered.
Make my day.
Yeah, but a lot of people wouldn't be, Scott.
But it's all meant to be a compliment.
That's my problem. I get stared at a lot just because I'm famous.
You are famous.
You know what I mean? People not even laughing because they're like, he is. He is.
They're not laughing because you're famous for the wrong reason, but yeah, you do.
Notorious,
Yeah, exactly. Infamous. But it is, I think that we've forgotten how to sort of, I don't know, be coquettish or how to flirt in a harmless way. I think it's difficult.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look,
if I were 30, that would.
It's a microaggression now, isn't it?
You think flirting's a microaggression?
In this culture, we're creating an ultra-puritanical culture. This is what we're doing. The new religion of wokeness, or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, I do want to explore that a little bit because would you accept, though, however, in the wake of the... No, you're just not going to accept anything I say. In the wake of the Me Too movement, okay, so there were people who were in power, men, who were misusing that power, abusing that power, and therefore something had to be done to sort of challenge that, didn't it? Wouldn't you say? But then now I suppose, and I know a lot of critics, I've read Ella Whelan on this and Joanna Williams on this, and they talk about the way in which even flirtation is now being sort of wrapped up with sexual assault, as though it's just as bad, and it's not.
That's one bad thing that happens. Another thing is that people get unfairly accused, false accusations. The other annoying thing about it is it's always Hollywood. It's always some powerful man. Then the idea is like all men are doing it, and most of us are not doing anything like that. And you know what I mean? It should be Hollywood that should be looked at, not just all men.
I think flirtation is allowed if you're good looking. I think that's okay.
Thank you.
Like coming out, like coming out of the closet. No one cares if some fat ugly person comes out. But it's also true that a lot of people spend their time staring at their screens all day long.
Yes.
So when eye contact is made with them, it's very intimidating, especially younger. I know that I have been in San Francisco, for instance, when I am there, and I drive there, and I've seen people on the street. They look like they're in duress. So they're waiting for an Uber, but I've pulled over and said, "Are you okay?" And when I make eye contact, they leap out of their shoes like I'm going to kill them. Yeah. So I know that is difficult for
They're just not used to human interaction anymore.
Is that because a lot of San Francisco people are sort of a bit autistic and they're in Silicon Valley and they're tech nerds?
You're using the word autism as a weapon, but
no,
yes,
I'm not.
You're right.
Oh, I knew you were going to say like that.
There's a weirdness out there, isn't there, in terms of the strangers and the way that people interact. There's a mistrust, which I do think is similar.
Well, a lot of people have guns, so it's worth mistrusting them. There's that. Yeah.
You're all armed.
People are stealing cars.
You're armed right now.
I am. Thank you for noticing. Pow, pow. People are stealing cars in California, not for the car, but for the gun in the car.
I mean, you people, it's chilling.
It's the Wild West, baby.
Okay. Let's turn to another topical story now. So the Archbishop of Canterbury has used his Easter sermon to criticise the government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda. Justin Welby said there were serious ethical questions about sending asylum seekers to the African country and that the principle cannot stand the judgment of God. Cabinet Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg responded by saying Welby, quote, misunderstood what the government's policy is trying to achieve. To get reaction to the Archbishop of Canterbury's comments, I'm joined now by Dr. Gavin Ashenden, who was an honorary chaplain to the Queen for for 9 years until 2017. He has since converted to Catholicism. Dr. Ashenden, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, good evening.
Could you just give us your initial response to what the Archbishop of Canterbury said?
Yes, it's a great day today. It's the day when Christians celebrate the resurrection of Christ, and this gives us a promise of the possibility of heaven and human transformation and the freedom of the soul. So it's a shame to have this particular day used as a platform to express a political policy. I think it would be easier if perhaps the Archbishop of Canterbury expressed a socialist policy politically, and perhaps the Archbishop of York could express a conservative one. Then we'd have some balance. But the Church of England has perpetually offered socialist, progressive political policies on the back of a spirituality. And the balance between politics and Christianity is always a very delicate one. And it seems to me they've had it wrong for a long time.
Isn't there an argument that if you look at the life of Jesus Christ, I mean, we can have debates, theological debates about what he meant, all we like, but one of the things he unambiguously said is that you can't enter the kingdom of heaven if you're rich, and that you should give your worldly goods away. Isn't that just unambiguously a socialist perspective?
Well, no, it isn't, because rich and poor in the context of the New Testament had a primary meaning of poverty. So rich is more about pride than it is about money, and poverty is more about poverty of spirit and humility than it is about money. Again, there was an interweaving between the two. But the point about Jesus is very well made, because a lot of people wanted him to express a political program. There were at least half a dozen messiahs who did that politically, and Jesus constantly kept out of politics, out of public policy, and focused entirely on the human soul and the human relationship with God. And that's partly why he was crucified in the end, because he didn't deliver what the nationalists and the political activists wanted.
But hasn't in this country there always been the conflation of church and state, with bishops in the House of Lords, for instance, the Queen is being the head of the national religion? Isn't this just something that we are going to expect from the Church of England?
Well, it's certainly true that throughout the last 1,000 years of European history, the Church has had a relationship with the state when it's been highly involved and done it well, and highly involved and done it very badly, and not at all involved and done it well, and not at all involved and done it badly. I think at every single point, the Church has to ask itself, is it converting the state to Christianity, or is it allowing the state to use it for political purposes? I'm afraid at the moment, I think the Archbishop is showing he's allowing the state to use his platform for a political program, and that's the wrong way round.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has a strong point when he says that the Archbishop of Canterbury has actually misunderstood the government's policy on this.
Well, I think he's misunderstood both the government policy and also the teaching of the New Testament. And I think he's getting them both wrong. Jacob Rees-Mogg may be right about the government's policy. I don't know. I'm not an expert. And anyway, the policy hasn't been put into action yet. So I assume one of the things that any sensible commentator would want to do is to wait and see what the strengths and weaknesses of it are. But more importantly, maybe, perhaps the Archbishop has a solution to mass migration and to the way in which the resources of this particular, the state that we're in, the NHS and our tax burden, our energy bills, maybe if he had something to say that solved the political problem, to give us an idea that he really was competent politically, that would be very interesting. But just to tell us that, in his view, a political program offends God, I think tells us nothing more than his own political reflexes.
But you know that in the Mass, there's always that moment of the Mass, the homily, where the priest will share, I'm speaking from a Catholic background here, the priest will share their views of the week usually on the basis of a news story. There's nothing new about this. I mean, I was very accustomed to this growing up and going to church and seeing this all the time. Why shouldn't Justin Welby have an opinion and have the freedom to express that opinion?
Well, I think partly because if you're a priest, you're going to have, if you're a priest and you speak politically, you're going to have in your congregation people of the left and the right and the middle. And it's quite important, if you're going to be their spiritual pastor, that you don't disenfranchise either a third or two-thirds of the congregation by taking a political view that the others just don't agree with. Because after all, the political views that we have are human constructs. They're much to do with personality and background and culture and preference. They don't have a great deal to do with spirituality. And that's one of the reasons why successful Christianity, successful priests take universal rules about the human soul and human transformation and human need and apply them to everybody, so that whether you're a utopian progressive or whether you're a diehard conservative, your soul gets touched and transformed. Christianity is about transforming the soul and getting people to heaven. It really isn't about trying endlessly to create utopia on this earth. Jesus told us that will never happen. We're in the business of getting people to heaven.
Do you think that Justin Welby will be responsive to the criticism that he's received off the back of this, or will he just go on behaving as he always has?
I don't want to make it personally about him so much. I think I'd want to ask his advisors what they think they're doing. I mean, the Church of England has been getting this wrong for the most of my lifetime, going back to Faith in the City and Margaret Thatcher. I'm sort of surprised his advisors thought it was a good thing for him to lambast the government in this fairly primitive way. So I hope someone will say, look, Archbishop, this isn't a very good example of a Christian understanding of Easter. This is getting yourself involved with politics and migration, and you need to show you've got some skill in this area before you tell the government how to behave.
Dr. Gavin Ashenden, thank you so much for joining me on Free Speech Nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. And first up, we've got the President of the USA, who's been hitting the headlines as ever.
America. God bless you all.
Now, the thing is, when you see these clips, I mean, Scott's got his head in his hands here, but, often we get this accusation that there is cognitive decline, and obviously that is a worry. But then, in America, you people have always enjoyed having elder statespeople, right?
People, yeah.
You trust older people to run the country.
I trusted Obama, and then he let me down, too. Look, he's very old, and he's the best they could do. And all I think when I see that is that he's going to walk into a wall and hit his head, and he might be, for all we know, dead inside and filled with sawdust. But what I think is going to happen, like the Queen, and what I think is going to happen is in 2 years, guess who's coming? I'm here. Guess who's going to come back?
Now, look, let's talk about that.
Trump is back. He's back already. He's campaigning right now.
Could it be a Hillary-Trump rematch? That's what I'm hoping for.
I just think that Trump will have almost no opposition because the Democratic Party, like the Labour Party here, is too weak to actually elect someone to run their party who's actually progressive. They've had the chance many times, and they just keep turning them down.
So when Trump was in power, there were lots of people on the left who were making speculations about his cognitive abilities. They were saying that he was a maniac. Mm-hmm. They were talking about how they were even diagnosing him with various mental disorders. Mm-hmm. And now it's happening the other way around, where people on the right are sort of trying to diagnose Joe Biden. Wouldn't it just be easier for us to say, we don't know what's going on, we're not their doctors,
Right. Or just say that all international leaders are warmongering lunatics. We could just say that.
I mean,
and agree on
right.
that.
You can say that if you wish.
I mean, I think the thing about Trump is he utilized his craziness to its benefit. He's basically a stand-up comedian and was much funnier than any of us in representing himself. Some comics actually miss him for that reason. And I think that what people do miss about Trump is that they felt as though he said what he actually thought, which did make him seem crazy because thoughts they're transient and they change. And what Biden seems to try to do is stick to script, although the script did clearly say turn to your right and shake someone's hand in parentheses, and no one was there.
I feel sorry for him, actually. When I see stuff like that, I sort of think...
Like you feel for that old person trying to find their way home.
Yeah,
that's why. But he's meant to be running a country of 400 million people. So.
What do you think? Are you a fan of Biden, Nick?
It's like those people who drive off the cliff because the GPS says it. That's what you're saying. The speech said shake someone, there's no one there. Biden's the worst president of all time, bar none.
Just say what you think, Nick.
Yeah, it's just obvious. If he was even elected, question mark. But I just say that to make I just say that so you do the Ofcom apology. It's so much fun.
I don't need to apologise. He was elected.
At least he's not broken any laws like Lincoln.
Look, the idea of you're linking the people speculating about Trump's mental health with Biden, in that case, that was just pure media propaganda. In this case, he's shaking hands with no one. There's actually a case for it.
We also saw that clip this week or last week of him trying to edge in and everyone's crowded around Obama.
And he's trying to tap him on the shoulder.
But again, I come back to the human element of this. This is just an old man who's in a job that perhaps he's ill-equipped to do.
It's sad on a human level. You can sympathise on a human level, but he shouldn't be leading the free world. because now we're in World War III.
Has Scott got a good point here, that there really isn't anyone else?
No, Scott, I'm just joking. Scott had a great point because
Kamala Harris was massively unpopular with the electorate.
She was terrible. What Scott's great point is they've ousted anyone actually radical or serious. So Bernie Sanders was the obvious candidate. They deliberately ousted him so that Hillary could win in some sort of dodgy way, and that's what they should have. They should have gone Bernie versus Trump.
I don't think it's dodgy at all. I think they chose the candidate they wanted. They're free to do that, and most Democrats who voted for Hillary thought they were voting for the right person. What I think the problem is in the U.S. as well as in Europe and the EU, I think what we discovered is that the political leaders who run the country have very little power, actually, and what's running the country is wealth, which is not necessarily in the hands of the leaders themselves.
Right.
So they're reaching out to wealthy donors to make decisions. So we really don't know what's happening. I think that's what frustrates the electorate, is they watch the political system happening and they feel detached from it. So because they've elected this person, and this person seems to be a mouthpiece or something they don't really understand.
But I think looking at whichever way you voted, and I'm presuming you voted Democrat, you know, whichever way that we look at this, his presidency has not been a success, has it? He's been, for a start, he shielded himself away during the election campaign. He seemed to win on the basis of not being Donald Trump.
Yes.
And then finally, when he's in office, the press are so reluctant to question him or grill him on anything. The only time they did it was Afghanistan, and he fell apart.
He did fall apart. And I think that part of the issue that's going right now is there's a lot of things that have hit him head on without him being planned on some of this stuff.
Sure.
So he's not a medical professional, and he's messed up the whole pandemic thing a few times. And I know that was happening when he came into office, but he's not actually done very well by that either.
So what can the Democrats do? Because obviously it won't be Biden next time running against, well, you think it's Trump he'll be running against? I don't know, but let's say it is.
Well, they did well with the Supreme Court. That woman's a great nominee. She's done very well in her interviews. I think if they can find a candidate that is as well-versed in important subject matter as she was, I think that would be very good.
But why can't they? What I don't understand about American politics is you've got all these people. You know, there's a lot of people in that country, and that was the best.
But who does Mattel Toys want in office? That's what's important.
Yeah, they get rid of
Who does Kodak want in office?
They get rid of the interesting people, and I still think there was something dodgy in the way Bernie was dealt with in the primaries. But you'll have to Google it. You'll have to Google it. But there was Andrew Yang, he was somewhat interesting. There was Tulsi Gabbard, who was very interesting. All those candidates get pushed aside for Biden because he's just been there forever, and it's just an establishment type who'll go along with whatever they say.
And Kamala Harris, I mean, you know, she
didn't Yang believe in the gold standard though? Some of them sounded a bit crazy when they talked about economics.
Yeah, Yang was in universal basic income, but he was interesting for a small time at least.
Of course, yeah, and he'd be a great mayor. But I think I do like the idea of someone who's not known yet. I think that's what they'll do.
Well, they'll have to because all the known.
Well, I think that's the only way it's going to be. But I'll be interesting to see if your prophecy regarding Trump comes true. Do you think he'll win?
Trump will definitely come back.
He's so powerful. He's the most famous person in the world.
Okay, well, we've got big tech.
But can he get back on Twitter? That's
the point. I think big tech will keep him off as much as possible, unless Elon Musk.
Yeah,
but they should let him back on him. Then he'll lose.
This is a great drama, isn't it? I mean, it's Shakespearean.
He won't lose if he's back on. He'll win.
I think he'll bury himself. He's his own worst enemy.
Donald Trump did claim that he won off the back of Twitter. I mean, he did. And then they unseated a sitting president.
He won because he was a TV star. That's why he won.
Potentially. Okay, so next up. Now, this is a Sky News reporter covering the Just Stop Oil protesters, and they unearthed some interesting information.
What are they achieving?
Well, what they're saying is they want maximum disruption to stop the government extracting oil and gas.
Yeah, but that's cooking oil.
What do you make of that, Nick?
Well, it was ridiculous, isn't it? It's much like when they attacked someone the other day who was in a chemical tanker, thinking it was an oil tanker, but it wasn't. They ripped his number plate off and all this kind of thing. Right. They attacked him, and it was nothing to do with the actual protest. It's this thing with these protesters, they're middle class, they're out of touch with what's actually happening. It's a sort of weird middle class versus working class thing. Toby Young said an interesting point the other day about why did the royal family not notice that Jimmy Savile was a bit dodgy? And his theory was that they'd never seen a working class person before and assumed that was just what they were like.
Well, that they all wear tracksuits and too much jewellery.
Exactly. And I thought it was a really interesting point. And I see a bit of that with some of these protesters. They don't understand that they're making working people's lives very difficult with their nonsense thing that they're doing to create meaning in their lives because they need God.
I mean, look, I've been to one of the Extinction Rebellion protests. It's true, there were a lot of plummy voices.
Why were you there?
I was there to write an article about it.
All right.
Yeah,
to stare at them.
Yeah, and I wanted to see Emma Thompson.
There's a spy.
Right, of course you did. Yeah. Academy Award winner.
Exactly. But, you know, there is a point that it felt very upper middle class to me. What was going on there, and their tactics do alienate a lot of working people.
It's so ironic because I know some of these people, and they want their strawberries all year long, but they don't want to pay to heat them. So it's a funny dichotomy, and I do wish that they would support nuclear power. It's our only way out.
You think that's right? Well, there's a big debate among environmentalists.
The planet is here because of nuclear power. It is the core of our universe. That's the only thing that powers everything we're looking at right now.
Well,
and it's all we have.
Well, we shall see how that develops, but we do. Do you want to come in last?
Well, it's Easter, so I was just going to say the planet's here because of God, but carry on.
Great.
Oh, God.
He's coming back to Easter every time, which is great. It's topical. Now, we're going to, this is the part of the show we're going to talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. Thank you ever so much, by the way, for all those people who send in your unfiltered dilemmas. I'm baffled every week because we never give you sensible answers, but you still keep doing it, and I do appreciate it. And we will, no, let's try this week. Let's try and absolutely seriously nail
In the
this.
name of Jesus, let's try.
Because it's Easter, here we go. In the name of the Easter Bunny, here we go. Our first dilemma is from an L. Johnson in Henley. Henley's nice, okay. Now, this is what he says. My husband is so tight, he even makes me pay for his weekly round of golf. What should I do about that? Now, you know you know a lot about relationships, don't you? You know what?
I do.
What would you? I'm going to be careful what I say here, but what would you say about that?
Well, I'm envious in a way because no one's ever called me tight, but also I do wonder if maybe she could punish him in a way.
Punch him?
Punish him.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean not physically,
right.
But I mean he's making her do this, so she's paying for it. She could charge him for make him do stuff around the house.
Do you think that's the way to cultivate a good relationship, though? Just through
it's a little give and take. It's all about compromise. Seriously.
Really?
Yes. If I let my husband tie me up, he'll make me a meal. So marriage is all about playing various roles.
I'm going to move on to Nick rather rapidly. What do you think about this?
I don't totally understand the dilemma. Like, what is there? I need to see their joint accounts. Because how is she paying for? And is it really is it his money and she's managing the money, or is it her money and she's just literally paying for the round of golf?
I think that's
because that is odd. In that case,
but when you get married, isn't it? I mean, you're a big believer in marriage, isn't it? That what's mine is yours in a marriage situation.
It is supposed to be, but the woman shouldn't be paying for the round.
Resources.
His wife shouldn't be paying for his round of golf. That does seem a bit off to me. Yes,
okay.
I'm going to say.
Well, maybe he can't handle the money. Maybe he's useless with cash and she's taking it over. And if you take that responsibility over, then you've got to manage it properly. You know.
Well, look, let's move on to another one.
Seriously.
This is another dilemma from Ross in Kent. Ross says, I got so drunk on a stag do this weekend that I ended up in hospital and my mum had to pick me up. I'm 30 years old. How can I face everyone at the wedding? You can't. That's embarrassing.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, your poor mother. I feel bad for her. It sounds like he's marrying his mom, which is creepy. Maybe they're Welsh. But maybe also, maybe his wife needs to take control of him and knock him around a little bit. You know, maybe that's what he wants.
What do you think, Nick?
Well, it wouldn't happen to me on all levels because I don't drink and I don't go to weddings because they're very boring. So even though I'm pro-marriage, I'm not pro-wedding. It's a complicated position.
Yeah.
Why don't you like
just
weddings?
get
It's a
married.
party, Nick.
Just get married in a church quickly.
Just curmudgeonly.
The weddings are boring. They're expensive. They're like, oh, come to Dublin, fly over and buy a hotel. Like, why am I paying for this? It's your wedding. What I do is at that point I just cut them off as friends, and I find the system works.
I'm not inviting you to my wedding.
Get married in a church. Don't have to do it in the eyes of the state, but don't have a wedding. That's my
Let's
position.
have a quick one more. We've got time for one more dilemma. This is from Aaron in Brighton. I've had an undeserved promotion at work. Well, at least you're honest. I'm totally underqualified to the point where I feel like I'm a fraud, but I'm faking it till I make it to the point where I'm actually being arrogant. Should I come clean, do the right thing, and refuse the promotion? Are you mad?
You know, comics fear this all the time. Someone's going to walk up on stage and tell us we're not funny, that they found out, that they've realized that we're...
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's a terrible thing to sense.
Well, it's true with a lot of comics.
It can be true. It's true with a lot of people who are in positions they don't know why they're there, you know?
I just know I'm a great comedian, never had it. Carry on. Sorry,
no, I just think once you're handed authority, you'll know it.
Okay, but should this person refuse the promotion? That's the question.
Bank the money, stick it in Bitcoin, because if you are a fraud, they'll find out sooner or later, and then you'll think, oh, I should just bank that money just just rinse it while he can.
Yeah, that's what you think. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think we've solved those. Of a kind, sort of. So thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. Thank you to my panel, Scott Caporo and Nick Dixon, to my guests, Alka Segal-Cuthbert, Harry Howard and Dr. Gavin Ashenden. If you want to hear more from James Bloodworth, you can do that on Free Speech Nation, the podcast. The full interval will be available very shortly. You'll be able to access it wherever you download your podcasts and on YouTube. And if you want to join us live in the studio, just go to www.sroaudiences.com and apply there. We'll see you next week.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is radio and TV legend Neil Fox, otherwise known as Dr. Fox. In The Big Question, can Labour win the next election? And reacting to the big stories of the day is my all-star panel, including EastEnders star Daniela Westbrook. Also, could we trust men to take the male contraceptive pill? And does Britain still love Marks and Spencer?